Welcome to another Hangout on Air by Federico Re, entrepreneurship coach and founder of Creative Entrepreneur. We are live. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Federico Re from Creative Entrepreneur in Melbourne, Australia. And in tonight's Hangout, we talk about astropreneurship and how does entrepreneurship lend itself to space exploration. And joining me tonight, I have two very, very exciting guests, which I'll introduce shortly. So coming back to the term astropreneurship, what is astropreneurship and how do entrepreneurs and astronauts actually work together in the industry of space to actually achieve the ultimate mission to Mars? So without saying too much more, I'd like to introduce my two very special guests, Dianne McGrath and Josh Richards. Dianne, welcome for tonight's show, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on, Federico.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So you're based in Melbourne, and we've also got Josh Richards, who's also based in Melbourne. Hello, Josh.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Look, it's a pleasure equally. So look, I'm honoured to have the two of you, not just one, but two of the potential candidates to the mission, Mars One mission. And just to sort of run through a few of the statistics or pretty much the background behind who Dianne and Josh are. They have been selected amongst over 200,000 eligible candidates to actually fly to Mars on a one-way mission, which sounds absolutely scary and extraordinary. And out of those 200 people that applied globally, only 100 so far have been noticed or perhaps shortlisted. And these two people are the two lucky ones. In fact, from the statistics, I think there are 7 Australians at the moment that are potentially eligible. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So it's almost like winning the lottery. So I do wish you all the best with Mars Mission Impossible. So just to give people, the audience, a bit of a background behind Mission One, Mars One. I keep saying the wrong word back to front. It's due to they are planning essentially to take 4 people to Mars approximately in 2026 or 2027, and beforehand there will be other missions without people. So hopefully Josh and Dianne will be those 2 people. So I'd like to also introduce Dianne as a adventurist. Of course, when it comes to space exploration, I couldn't think of anything else. You also have a philosophy to sustainability. So you're pretty much, you have a very strong interest in sustainability, particularly in the food industry or waste management, and maybe your official title is business / food waste consultant. Would that be the right way of describing you?
Yeah, sort of sustainability and business consultant, but I'm doing research PhD in food waste.
Fantastic. It's a very specialised area, I'm guessing, Dianne. And with Josh, Josh, you're a physicist, but to add to that, you're also an engineer and a stand-up comedian. Now, that's quite a unique blend between the three, I must say.
It's I like to call it career ADD, but yeah, I've bounced around a little bit.
What an awesome portfolio of expertise there. I do know that engineers are typically quite serious people, and I used to once be an engineer before I got into business and entrepreneurship, but I've not really come across engineers that are humorous. So it'll be interesting to talk to you tonight, Josh.
Cheers.
So let's get straight into it, guys. What I really want to do is explore the term astropreneurship and maybe start with you, Dianne, and in a nutshell, in a few words, what is your understanding of the term astropreneurship, given that it's a relatively new age term?
Yeah, well, I hadn't heard of it before you mentioned it, Federico, and so when I thought about it, it really made me think about entrepreneurship, but obviously within the space sector, and I guess is that difference. What makes an entrepreneur versus an astronaut, or even just someone that works in the space sector? And I guess it's that aspect of risk taking, of a different sort of risk taking that might be more broad and more acceptable than if you were just a standard astronaut. And I think also the possibilities.
Wow, so you've used quite a few key words there of risk taking and possibilities. Josh, how would you extend that a little bit further?
There's an aspect of being bounded.
Okay, all right. Let's explore that terminology a little bit further, or pretty much what it takes to be an entrepreneur or an astronaut or an entrepreneur for that matter, and let's essentially infuse all such words together and discover really what does it take to go to Mars? What's the ultimate skill set to have? Josh, what do you think?
I think it's primarily about flexibility, flexibility and having a larger perspective. It's very
We've got a few technical issues here, which is expected on a mission to Mars. So, Houston, are we there? Josh? We'll just let Google Hangout do its thing, and as Josh is coming back to us, we'll probably bounce back to Dianne. Dianne, I'll let you continue with that. What are your thoughts about what does it take really to reach Mars in terms of personality traits and skill set? And let's always draw a parallel to entrepreneurship.
I think that Josh started touching on that there, that flexibility and adaptability. And if you think about an entrepreneur, they need to move with how a market's changing and evolving and the opportunities that present and respond to things in an agile way. An astronaut has to be able to do that, to problem solve on the go, but from a place of trusting in their own knowledge as well as trusting in the advice and knowledge of those around them. So there's an aspect of trust and team that even an entrepreneur has as well. Even if it's a solo venture, you're almost always connected with other groups that can advise you or give you ideas.
Wow, that's certainly some amazing traits, and I'm guessing a lot of these traits are traits that you possess yourself, Dianne, is that right?
I'd like to think so. I mean, they're the key sort of characteristics that Mars One are looking for. They're looking for people who are adaptable and resilient, resourceful and creative, as well as curious. And these are all the sorts of characteristics that, yes, an astronaut has, but undoubtedly all successful business people have, especially entrepreneurs.
Sure. So obviously, out of 200,000 eligible candidates, what do you believe was your formula to success so far in being the chosen 100?
I guess like any job that you apply for, there's a selection criteria of qualities, but also skills that people are looking for. And I've obviously presented that I have the qualities that they're looking for, and the skill set, which also includes the capacity to learn, because you're constantly having to learn in this area, and the skills that will be taught to go to Mars, everything from obviously flying the spaceship to growing all of the food to fixing solar panels, everything. These are the sorts of things we need to be able to do. So I guess I've been able to show that I have these capabilities, that I understand the vision and I understand the risks associated with the mission as well.
Yeah, look, you're using terms that I'm very familiar with as an entrepreneur myself. I tend to refer to such terms when I coach people and explain what does it take to be successful in the business world, and particularly if you're wanting to pursue the serial entrepreneurship path, what does it really take? And you've certainly touched upon some really good ones. The ones that I'm particularly keen to explore that little bit further and going into it on a deeper level is really passion and inspiration. And I guess what inspired you to apply for this this opportunity?
Oh gosh, well, I think actually it's probably very much in line with what happens with many entrepreneurs. You see something and it ignites something in you. It's something that connects with you. And when I read about the Mars One mission, when I first saw a call for astronauts to establish the first permanent human settlement on Mars, it just seems like such an extraordinary opportunity that I couldn't say no to it. And I think that's the way a lot of entrepreneurs see a business opportunity. This isn't obviously about a business. This is about doing something extraordinary for humanity, but it's about having a big vision, a big goal, and not being afraid to go for it.
So the way I interpret it, in terms of risk, I certainly would put space exploration on the highest level in terms of risk taking, and it would go way beyond my experience or what Earthlings would go through as serial entrepreneurs on this earth. So emotionally, how do you prepare yourself for such a mission like that? And obviously you've got a number of years ahead of you before that mission actually takes place. But what are you doing, say today, day to day, to actually emotionally, physically get ready for this mission?
Yeah, and look, it's a difficult thing to do, and anytime you have an extraordinarily long-term goal, when you're looking at a vision which is 10, 15 years away, you have to work for today as well as prepare for tomorrow. And I guess, we're only partway through the selection round yet. We haven't completed that. So I'm trying to get through the next few rounds of selection, while at the same time thinking about what do I need to be, what sort of person and qualities do I need to develop, further enhance, to make sure that I'm in the best position possible if I do get selected to go. So a lot of training.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point you've made, and without revealing your secrets, because obviously you'll be competing with 100 other people.
It's not competition, though. It's I think, and Josh, I'm sure Josh will pipe up here too. It's not really competitive. This is a group that all have the same vision, and so we all want to see humanity expand into the solar system to establish the first settlement on Mars and to take us to the next level. And so if we can help each other get there, which we do constantly, then it's not competitive. It's a bit different.
That's interesting, because in the world of business you have to be competitive, but I do equally understand and open my thought to the fact that, you know, this is a community here. This is making history, and we need to work together as Earthlings to accomplish this very incredible milestone in the civilization of people. Josh, I'm glad to have you back here, and just to sort of pick your brain that little bit further. So far, Dianne has made comments about what does it take to be an astropreneur, an explorer, an entrepreneur, and some of the words that we've come up so far are words like learning, risk-taking, vision, creativity. Can you add a few more there that perhaps define who you are?
Resilience is probably the first one for everything. There's so much that we've already dealt with as candidates, where we've been ridiculed in the public, we've been ridiculed by academia, there's been all sorts of different things happen at different points, and I suppose being resilient and having that clear vision as to what it is we want to achieve and why it's important to us, that's probably the biggest thing, is being able to take the knocks. We discussed it very briefly offline before we got started, but I talked about sort of dealing by a rule of thirds, where 1/3 of people will adore what you're doing and think it's the greatest thing ever. 1/3 of people will sort of shrug their shoulders and go, that's interesting, and then 1/3 will absolutely hate it. And you have to appreciate the 1/3 that adores it. You have to try and convert the 1/3 that sort of shrugs their shoulders, and you have to deal with the criticism, and you have to deal with the flack from the 1/3 that hates it. And you just have to keep going.
Absolutely, and dealing with skeptics is part of your formula to success. I'd like to sort of touch upon vision a little bit further. What is your vision as far as this mission? What particular component or aspect or phase of the mission do you most think about?
I suppose the biggest factor for me, and it's one of the things that's very handy at the moment, is I have the opportunity to sort of speak in schools. I know that Dianne speaks in schools quite a bit as well, and being able to discuss space exploration with an entire generation of kids and tell them that the options are there, that the opportunities are there if they want to pursue them. That's probably the biggest thing, and that's the biggest influence on vision for me, of having a generation of kids growing up wanting to work in space. I grew up in a generation where, because of Australian citizenship, you had to become an American, you basically had to become an American to go into space. Andy Thomas was the classic case for that. Yeah. And I grew up in an environment where that was the only option you had, and it's different now. Wow.
Interesting stuff, guys. And just the more we talk about this topic, the more I get drawn to it, and I'm fascinated by it. In fact, I have my own, memories as a child about space, and hence why I've been so much drawn to people like you in my field of expertise, and really drawing a parallel between space exploration, the astronaut, and entrepreneurship is something that I keep wanting to explore even further. What is your differentiation, if you can do such a thing, between an astronaut and an entrepreneur? Because if we go back 50 years, I don't think necessarily that we would define the astronaut as an entrepreneur. But nowadays, more and more that the two are coming together and tying together. So, what is your philosophy about or experience about astronauts going back 50 years, and how do they differ today? Either one of you, Dianne, maybe? I'll direct it to you, Dianne.
Okay, sure, no worries. Well, as you mentioned before, 50 years ago, we had a very different space sector, I guess. It was very much driven by the incumbent, the government-run agencies. And these days, it's not just necessarily about just being an astropreneur or somebody who might be an astronaut, but anyone that's going to work in the space sector doesn't have to come from the government anymore. And so that means that there's this opportunity now that didn't exist to take things in a direction that doesn't have to be bounded by the same ways of working that government has. So
Yes.
you can take risks, you can take a novel concept and take it in a totally different direction that you couldn't have done in the past because of the fact that you were a government employee. Now there are subcontracts from the government out to private agencies. There are not-for-profits like Mars One who are seeking to go and establish settlements on Mars. The endless options available now, I think, really is what it helps illustrate what an astropreneur is now versus maybe just an astronaut before who worked and was trained to work in space.
Look, I could certainly see many advantages of this mission being funded by private companies and entrepreneurs like the Richard Bransons of the world. Do you see any disadvantages or any limitations with regards to private funding compared to government coming into it?
There's definitely an aspect of heritage. You talked about sort of, NASA putting men on the moon 40 plus years ago, and so people associate major discoveries, major actions and things like that with governmental space agencies. The Rosetta mission recently, absolutely extraordinary what they achieved, but once again, it's a government agency, and there is definitely an attitude amongst the space industry that it's government agencies that do the big things. They subcontract out the smaller stuff, the things that have already been done. Neil deGrasse Tyson has quite famously gone on record talking about how NASA is going to go and explore Mars, and they'll subcontract out the relatively easy stuff of supplying the International Space Station to people like SpaceX. And so there is an attitude that is pervasive throughout the industry and sort of amongst the public as well, that only government agencies can do these things. Only governments are big enough, and even only governments working together in international cooperation are big enough. And the reality is a lot of government agencies have to deal with more bureaucracy than sort of the private agencies do, because we're more single-minded in what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Without getting too specific about particular organisations and their pursuits, what I do know, and what we all know, is that there are a number of companies out there like SpaceX, pretty much that is aiming to explore space and wanting to be at the forefront of competition. Do you think that there's a race to Mars? Do you think that there's a first spot in this pursuit?
I definitely think it's a competition. Sorry, is it clear, my audio?
Yep.
There's definitely a slightly more competitive environment now, but I think that it's one that it's not quite collaborative, but it's one that's going to help the whole sector advance a lot faster, where we do see people wanting to go to Mars. Branson in the press recently saying, yep, I'm heading to Mars. We've got SpaceX saying that, and a number of other not-for-profits that are also seeking to go to Mars, as well as the big incumbents such as NASA and so on. So with so many people wanting to go there, just like in any marketplace, you see a lot faster advancement of technology. You see technology becoming more cheaply available as well. And even though it's not necessarily always meant this way, there's sometimes a sharing of results which allows things to advance in different directions. And so I think that the excitement and I think that the competition and the race at the moment is something which there will be a flag that's planted one day on Mars, and who will be there first? That's going to be really interesting.
Well, it definitely is interesting, and it'll set the history books for good. And it's like the race between America and Russia back in the 50s and 60s, and perhaps all of this will converge into one, and all the organisations might work together to make this happen. Who knows what will happen?
And we see then with that we then see humanity.
Humanity and its adventurous spirit and all that. So just for the viewers who are listening out there today, we have Dianne McGrath and Josh Richards joining me tonight, and we're exploring the topic of astropreneurship. How does entrepreneurship lend itself to space exploration? We're just talking about really what does it take to be an astronaut and an entrepreneur, and how do the two pretty much come together? What are the common threads? We've explored a number of terms, words, qualities, features, attributes such as learning, risk-taking, opportunity, vision, resilience, dealing with skeptics. In terms of, maybe Josh, this is a question for you. In terms of leveraging on your humorous side or your expertise in comedy, if that's probably the way of representing you, how do you think you have an advantage over other candidates?
I kind of caught the tail end of what you and McGrath and Dianne were talking about just before, about sort of competition and leveraging and that side of things. I'm very much along the same lines as Dianne. There is absolutely no competition in any of this. It's all about us putting boots on Mars. It's about people getting there. I regularly have discussed about the fact that if there was a better candidate, if there were people who were better suited to the role than I am, I'd gladly get out of the way and support them to make it happen, because I believe in what we're trying to achieve. The best way for me to support what we're doing is to be a vocal ambassador, and the best skill set that I have for that is essentially taking science and trying to make it as funny as I possibly can, and being an ambassador for this idea. My skill set lends itself to making that funny as best I can. But if someone turned around and said that my personality wasn't right for what we were trying to achieve, there's no point in me trying to change who I am to suit the mission. They need to find the right people for what we're trying to achieve. So I'll be an advocate, I'll be an ambassador, I'll put my hand up to go, but it's entirely up to the psychologists and the selection panel and people like that to actually pick the right people for it.
Of course, and I'm sure that'll be very, very stringent. But I do believe that humour does go a long way, and in the world of business, having fun along the journey is such an important, critical element to surviving, I guess, the long journey. Dianne, what's your pearl of wisdom, if you want to share to the audience, and perhaps what is one key, unique attribute that you possess that is certainly worth considering?
I guess my one pearl of wisdom, I don't know if it's a one pearl of wisdom, it's more of a philosophy that I have around life, and it's probably something which I'm sure some of your listeners who are entrepreneurs would have a similar thought about, and that's no, I wish I had of. I don't want to ever sit there in those last days and think, geez, I wish I'd have not pressed enter on that application form to go to Mars. You've only got one life, and no matter where it is, spent here on another planet or doing whatever it is that you do and do well, make it interesting and make it worthwhile, make it purposeful. So that's kind of my approach in life, and if I can do that as part of the Mars One mission, fantastic.
That's fantastic, and I love talking about quotes and philosophies and principles, but we don't have too much time for that. I might just add one more and say, love what you do, and that's one of my favourite quotes. One last question to either one of you, and first in best dressed, I guess, is the term preneur, or the acronym preneur, has been widely used more and more these days, and just like we're exploring astropreneurship, what is the extent to which this term can be used, and is there a limit to how much we can use it? And do you think that entrepreneurship is so well suited to being an astronaut? Do you think there's a limitation? We hear terms like coachpreneur and chefpreneur and mumpreneur. What is your insight on that, Dianne?
I'll just touch on it briefly, but I think Josh might have some thoughts on this too. It's if we start using it for everything, have we jumped the shark? If we go back to happy days, I think that it does help indicate that there's something which is edgy going on, something exciting, something which is innovative that's about to happen. And I guess adding that thing astro or chef or whatever just tells you what sector it's going on in.
So actorpreneur or comedypreneur, is that a term that you would adopt yourself, Josh?
No, I'll be quite honest. No, I think it reflects that you're approaching things differently. I think that you're trying new ideas and you're looking for alternative ways to approach something. But rather than sort of, I suppose my thing has always been describe what I am. And so if you're talking about astropreneurs and things like that, if that's the way you describe yourself, brilliant. I've always tried to eke out an existence working in science comedy, and that's my sort of approach to things. Call yourself whatever you need to. I think as long as you're looking for new ideas and approaching things in new and creative ways, it doesn't really matter what label you use, as long as you're coming up with new ideas and trying things differently.
Perfect explanation. Do you think that astropreneurship will be there in years to come, and will it be a term that will grow in popularity?
Maybe.
Look, I I think that the sector, because it is changing so much and has so many more new players that are in the private sector, not-for-profit, and universities and so forth that are playing in space now, I guess it won't need to be defined by the sector. I think that they'll just use the word entrepreneur.
Nice explanation. Guys, we'll wrap up the session very shortly. I'd like to really thank you both for tonight, for your time, for your insight, for your expertise. I wish you all the best for this exciting journey that lays ahead of you, and I'll be watching for sure when you guys get mentioned in the program, and certainly I'll be watching the TV when it happens in 2026. So I'll say goodbye, and a big thank you to both of you, and we'll end the session now.
For more of Federico's Hangouts on Air, please visit www.creativeentrepreneur.com.au.